Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So I'm really excited about today's video because I'm going to be talking a little bit about my personal PhD journey and how I'm finding a PhD in the USA having moved from the UK. We're going to split this video into three parts. Part number one is going to be about my application journey for those of you out there looking for applications for PhDs and stuff. So we're going to focus on that for part one. Part two is going to be talking about like the differences that I found between UK and US, PhD specifically, what I have learned this semester that might help anyone else out there doing their first year in their PhD, and what I love about my course and my PhD program. And then part three is going to be the stuff that surprised me, and this is the stuff that I didn't expect out of a PhD and stuff that nobody tells you. That's what I want to get into today. So let's dive into part one of this video. Okay, so we can't really talk about PhDs without talking about part one, which is the application process. And I've talked a lot about this either on my LinkedIn or like in previous YouTube videos if you've been seeing them. And if you are applying for PhDs either starting in fall 2023 or like looking to start in 2024, then I will link those videos below in the description. But I want to talk a bit about my application process. And I came to the PhD game kind of late. So I didn't realize I wanted to do a PhD until probably like halfway through my fourth year of vet school. And then I was like, oh, I really like research, you know? So I didn't have the research experience behind me that a lot of other people would have had if they've come from like a biology major or whatever major, you know, because you have to do lab experience and you have to do this project. Whereas we didn't have to do any of that. So I was kind of behind and started a bit on the back foot. So I tried really, really hard to get as much research experience as I could. I emailed a lot of professors. I tried to sort of make my own research experience as much as I could and applied to a load of PhD projects at the end of my sixth year, hoping to get in, and I got rejected. Every single one, literally every single one. Like the rejection emails were rolling through. I was like, oh, this isn't good, is it? Never mind. It's not all easy and you will get rejected, and that is okay. It does not mean that you're not good enough. So don't tell yourself that, and you just got to try again next year. So the application process was a bit of an adventure. It didn't go exactly how I wanted it to plan, but we came to the second time around and I had a couple of offers from the UK and I had my offer from here. So this is where the part of the video kind of want to go into why I chose to study in the USA. I chose to study in the USA for a number of reasons, and this is all personal choice. I'm not saying that one's better than the other. Like, it's very, very, very much personal. Half of it was down to like the fun and the adventure of like studying abroad. I always wanted to study abroad. I knew that's something that I always wanted to do, and I had this opportunity and I was like, oh my goodness, amazing. Sense of adventure, that's too. Also Cornell, that was literally, yeah, to be honest, it was the only school I applied to in America because I knew that this was where I wanted to come. Was I going to make the move across the pond? I was definitely going to come to Cornell. And that boils down to my veterinary background. I felt like, again, my opinion and my experience, I felt like Cornell really did appreciate the fact, not appreciate, like value and respect the fact that you had a DVM degree, which I know that some programs didn't. Like a lot of programs that I had previously applied to kind of didn't value the DVM degree as much as they did an MD degree. But I just felt that Cornell really, really valued the DVM degree, which was nice. And it also enabled me, it boiled down to the fact as to what I wanted to get out of my PhD. And I talked about this in a previous video, but it all came down to my why. And that really led my choice of which program I ended up choosing. For me, I wanted to come out a fully formed little scientist. This program would allow me to do that with the combination of like courses, like using my DVM degree, but able to rotate in other labs and other experiences. This would allow me to come out being the scientist that I wanted to be out of my PhD. So that is ultimately why I chose it and decided to move to the USA. So that is kind of a bit of background to my application story and why I decided to choose this. So I just quickly want to move on to how my first semester and second semester at this point is going and how I am finding my PhD journey. So number one we're going to get to is classes and courses. So this is one of the major differences between PhDs in the US and the UK. The US, you're required to take classes. You had to take a set number of credits every semester. For my program at least, that's kind of what you have to do to become like an expert in one particular field. So you choose like that major and you pick classes based on that. Yeah, get really good at them and know your stuff. And this is something that like I was super nervous about when I joined, because I was like, I'm never going to be able to keep up with a project and classes. My love for them definitely outweighs it. What I have found is that you get real flexibility in which classes that you want to take on my program, which is really, really nice. So I can pick ones that I'm genuinely interested in rather than like having to do a load of compulsory classes that I'm not really interested in. Having to learn about equine dentistry, like I was never really interested in that. So now I get to learn about the fun stuff that I am interested in, and that's really fun. So there's loads of learning opportunities there. The other thing is it also gives you a lot of food for thought when you're coming up with projects and trying to choose stuff. So you, in your first year especially, I found that I've really been able to explore a wide range of topics and figure out which ones I am interested in, which ones I'm not interested in, and then use that to guide my choice of labs to rotate in. Whereas if I hadn't had classes, I might have ended up rotating in some labs and finding it a bit of a waste of time because I wasn't really interested in that topic anyway. So this is like a really nice way I found of being able to do that. It also gives you a lot of ideas, like I came up with a lot of ideas for literature reviews and like projects that I wanted to work on through questions that I had in class. So that's a really great one, and one of the reasons I love classes. What I have learned though, and this is a tip I kind of want to pass on to other first year PhDs who maybe aren't used to taking the whole class thing like I wasn't at all, is you have to have a system. Like I have definitely found that I need a system to stay on track with all my assignments, when I've got classes, when stuff's due, emails I need to send, like stuff like that. I really needed a system, and this comes into my last video that I did last week, which is how I use my iPad. That is literally my system. I'll link that video below or up there or wherever, but that literally is my system right there, and it's kept me sane throughout my PhD. So I would highly recommend getting yourself a system. And then the other thing we've got to talk about is the rotations. So this is something that I like talk about a lot, and I've definitely mentioned a lot, but I'm going to explain it a bit just in case you guys don't know what they are or whatever. So rotations are basically lab rotations. So on my program, we're required to do 3 rotations across 3 different labs, which is 3 different projects, 3 different PIs, 3 different everything. And each rotation lasts like 3 months-ish. On our program anyway. It will vary between program and college and whatever, but you kind of have to do all of those rotations before you then choose your lab that you're going to go in. Ultimately, to start with, I thought this was a really good idea, and then I like looked at it and I was like, oh, why do we have to spend like a whole year doing these rotations? Like, why can't we just jump right in? I was so keen to get started, and I was a bit like, oh, that's kind of annoying. But now I'm so pleased that we've had to do rotations. I genuinely would not change it, and I highly recommend doing a PhD that has rotations in them. It is, in my opinion, the only way you can get a true feel for the lab and whether you think you're going to be a good fit there in terms of people, project, mentorship, all of these factors. The only way to do it is to like actually go in there and like give it a go for 3 months. It's all very well like talking to people, but people are only going to ever give you their experience, and you're never going to know what your experience is unless you try it. So I found that these rotations really helped me figure out what labs I didn't want and what labs I did want, like style of learning wise. They might work for some people, but they didn't work for me, and vice versa. So I would definitely recommend doing rotations and trying something a little bit different for your rotation. So having 2 in a field that you know, and then maybe like 1 in something a little bit different just to try it out, because who knows, maybe that could be a really great collaboration, or maybe you'd find that that's something you're really interested in. Okay, so I now want to get a bit serious, and I want to cover the things that I wish I had known before doing a PhD, or the things that were a bit more unexpected when I started my PhD. Number 1, it is okay to not have everything figured out when you start your PhD. That is definitely something I learned, because I thought that I had to have it figured out. You know, when you apply and you kind of have to decide what project you want to apply for and all of this. And that's true for some programs, but I found that in my experience, I do not have to have everything figured out yet as a first year. And you really can take the opportunity to like learn as much as you can and just try and expose yourself to as much like different research and that kind of stuff before you decide what you want to do. Even if you do have to decide on a lab and you find you absolutely hate it, chances are there's probably something you can do about that. But also, even if you decide on a lab and you love it but you're not thrilled with your project, like there are ways that you can change stuff and maybe try and find a different angle, or like you don't have to have everything figured out all at once, and you don't have to like stick with it. So that was definitely something that I learned that I didn't realize when I first applied to PhDs. Another thing was that the PhD will challenge you in ways you didn't even know were possible to be challenged in. So I kind of thought, oh, it's going to be stressful, but it's like stressful in ways I didn't think like were going to be stressful, or like a different type of stress that I hadn't experienced before. Not that that's a bad thing, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but what it has taught me is that like having a balance and prioritizing yourself is key. Being able to have things outside of work that you can go and do to distract yourself, or people to chat to, just to like hang out on the weekend, having stuff like that and prioritizing yourself is like has been essential for me in being able to maintain like the level of productivity that I do throughout the week, and having that kind of protected time sometimes on the weekends or sometimes on the evenings to just like take time for yourself is really important. Another thing that I did not expect and nobody told me was how much reading you're going to have to do. Reading papers is going to be your new best friend. I did not even like remotely realize how much reading I was going to do. I thought most of my time would be spent like in class doing assignments or in the lab. No, most of my time, like 90% of my time is going to be spent reading. Like I will read enough to get a background information on what I'm doing, to come up with new project ideas, to do these assignments, to be able to have informed conversations with people about my topic. I will end up having to read. If you haven't already watched my how to read like a PhD video, then now is definitely the time. I will also link that video below. I've also found, again, to develop a system with this, knowing how to effectively read a paper, how to effectively take notes with it, has been invaluable in helping me on my PhD journey, because it's something that I did not think that I was going to have to do as much of. And the final thing is that it's okay to ask. I always thought that like, oh, you have to be independent and figure everything out on your own. And to an extent that is true. Yes, you do have to be independent and figure a lot of stuff out on your own. But if you don't know what to do, ask. Like if you don't know how to run an experiment, ask someone. It will save time, money, and everyone will be pleased that you asked rather than did everything wrong and ended up ruining something or wasting loads of the lab's money on something because you did it not properly. People oftentimes always would rather you ask. So asking for help when you need it is definitely something that I thought was going to be less encouraged, I think, at the PhD level, but in fact it's more encouraged at the PhD level, so that's another little unexpected thing. Also, in terms of just asking in general, if you have any questions about like life, academia, career choices, if you're an international student and you have international worries, like just asking someone, finding out where those offices are and making use of the support system that your college has, because chances are they have a pretty good one, and it's always good to make use of those things rather than just like stress yourself out and just remembering that you're not on your own in this. Okay, so there is a little whistle-stop tour of my kind of PhD experience so far. We are still very early into our journey, but I just kind of wanted to cover how I dealt with the whole application process, what I love about my course, and then things that kind of were a bit less expected, and try and pass on some tips that I found that I wish that I knew before I started my first year of my PhD. Obviously, we're still early days, so I'm still very much learning, so if anyone else has any other tips, then please drop them below. Again, this is like completely all my experience and like my opinions here, so it might not work for everybody, but that's kind of the stuff that's worked for me. So I hope that that kind of vaguely helps people who are either thinking of maybe doing a PhD or are currently starting a PhD. And so yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this week's video. If you have, please leave it a little comment and a like and a thumbs up or whatever people do on YouTube. And if you want to see more from my channel, then please do subscribe. Thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed. I really appreciate it, and it's great to have a little PhD community here. So I'm really enjoying this little community that we have here. If there's any other videos in particular that you want to see from me, then please drop a comment below and I will do my best to make some more and try and make them well for everybody. But yes, thank you so much for watching this video again, and I will see you guys next week, next Friday. Yeah, bye.